In the early 80s, Joe DeAngelo became a family man in Citrus Heights, California. And at that same time, the police say the East Area rapist turned original Nightstalker suddenly stopped his decade-long vicious crime spree.
So when you think about a serial killer just blending into society, being this evil amongst us, I know for me, I wonder, how does somebody who has committed those atrocities, how are they able to continue and live a normal life?
If the accused Joe DeAngelo is found guilty, it seemed he did just that. By early 1986, the DeAngelos were expecting their second child. Then later that year, it appears the DeAngelos moved away from Citrus Heights.
We know that he had a daughter born in the Los Angeles County in 1986, and I know he purchased a gun in Whittier, California in 1986 as well. It appears that if he's having a daughter down there, he's likely relocated his family to that area.
This information that investigators learned about DeAngelo is crucial to their case. It placed their suspect near the location of the next brutal murder.
May 5th, 1986, 19-year-old Janelle Cruz ends up being bludgeoned to death.
Police were called to a horrific crime scene just a few miles south of Los Angeles in Irvine.
Family was away on vacation at the time. She was home alone. She was beaten about the face and head, and she was raped and murdered on her bed. There is a pipe wrench missing from the backyard of that residence, and so that was believed to be the murder weapon.
Once again, the crime scene had all the markings of the original Nightstalker, 5 years after his last attack.
I just think he ended up seeing her, couldn't help himself, and ended up having to commit his very last attack.
And with that, the killer receded back into everyday life. But this time, he seemed to stay there. Paul Holes has a theory for why.
Well, some of these offenders, they start to slow down as they get older, and then eventually, I do think they stop.
Oftentimes for people who are psychopaths, we find that their testosterone tends to be out of proportion to an average male. As they get older, there's still going to be a naturally downward sloping curve, and it's perhaps that he did not have quite the impulses to carry out violence anymore, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't getting those needs met elsewhere.
It's hard to believe that you could go 150 miles an hour down the freeway and then stop suddenly, but I think he just might have.
By the summer of 1989, Joe DeAngelo was living under the radar, back at his home in Citrus Heights. Now a father of 3 young girls, he ended up getting a job close to home as a truck mechanic for the supermarket chain Save Mart. Robert Brown, a supervisor at the depot, knew Joe for more than 20 years.
Did you have any first impressions of him back then?
He was a nice guy, friendly enough, knew what he was talking about, and he did his job well.
So he was a good mechanic?
Yeah, good mechanic.
But according to his neighbor, SONJA GORMAN, DeAngelo was anything but your typical suburban dad.
The man was very abrasive, and he was scary to children and to us as adults. And so when they'd come out and play in the backyard, he would start yelling at his own children, and if he heard our children up here, he'd yell at them.
Was there something about the way that he yelled at you that made you scared?
Yeah, Joe taught me how to cuss. The words that I heard on this side of the fence were the earliest and the most foul that I had ever heard, and it was traumatizing. It scared me and my siblings to death.
But what caused the most friction between the neighbors was the Gorman's Rottweiler.
It irritated him to know that we had a dog.
There are lots of people that don't like dogs barking. Was his response to dogs something more than just a typical response?
Oh my gosh, it was scary. One time, I was in the backyard, I was just doing my gardening, and all of a sudden, he came around the corner. He had come through the front gate, came into the backyard, and he scared me. I get goosebumps even right now just talking about it, because it scared me. It scared me really bad.
According to the Gormans, DeAngelo's rage was so intense that they say he acted on it.
We came home from church one weekend and there was a message that said, if you don't shut that dog up, I'll bring a load of death to your house. My dad immediately recognized the voice as Joe.
According to Grant, DeAngelo admitted making the call when Grant's father confronted him.
In that year that we had the death threat left, the dog started having serious medical issues and we had to put the dog down. And our family is suspicious that Joe might have poisoned the dog and it went undiagnosed.
It's a striking coincidence that some of DeAngelo's neighbors in both Auburn and in Citrus Heights believe he poisoned their dogs, although they don't have evidence to prove it.
Were you tempted to call the police?
I never thought of that because I've never had to call the police in all the time I've been here, but I just knew that I wanted nothing to do with him and his family.